The other issue here is I think that the Chargers will absolutely challenge the left side of the Chiefs' offensive line, and I think Mack versus Simmons will be a matchup to watch in this game.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday. That means it's a Greg Cosell Thursday. Greg is presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. It's also the first of two, count them, two Greg Cosell episodes this week. We are not messing around this year, right? College Draft Podcast is killing it on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. The Even Money Podcast is crushing it as well on YouTube. Again, I'm not going to say the YouTube URL again, but it's Ross Tucker NFL on YouTube. We will have a second, by the way, for those of you who didn't know that, second Even Money Podcast episode releasing today, where we talk about the line movement over the last 48 hours. We talked to Dr. Chow, the former longtime Chargers team orthopedic surgeon, about injury information we should be aware of for these games. Steve will have some prop bets. Steve will have, some parlays for those of you that are so inclined. So not one, but two Even Money podcasts and two Greg Cosell podcasts. Remember, we got 6 Ross Tucker football podcasts. So we got 2 Gregs, and then Saturday, we'll have the Saturday sit down. I think it'll be Jay Feely this week talking about the impact, the longtime kicker, the impact of the new touchback rule. I will announce the winners each week, probably on Saturday. So make sure you're spreading the word via social media at Ross Tucker Pod. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL, or just rating and reviewing the show, taking advantage of any of our sponsors, or giving us a shout out on YouTube. You can always make it easy on me by emailing me, ross@rosstucker.com. My guy, Greg Cosell, always makes it easy on me. I ask some questions. He gives great answers. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, Greg, so fired up for the double dose of Greg Cosell this season. Going to be absolutely epic. This first week, Greg, we're kind of going to figure out the timing a little bit. I don't know, how many games we'll get to today's episode, how many games we'll get to tomorrow's episode. I certainly don't want to rush you. We'll try to get to as many as we can. I will note we're not going to get to every game every week for a bunch of different reasons, right? We want to make sure we're really doing justice to the biggest game. So if we miss your team one week, I'm pretty confident we'll probably end up getting them the next week, right? So what goes around comes around. Let's start with my first game, Greg. Tonight I'll be in the booth with Kevin Harlan for Westwood One Radio. If those of you that are driving around or you want to listen to the streaming, westwoodonesports.com. It's the Cowboys, it's the Eagles, which means, Greg, we have to start with the news that came down a week ago after you and I recorded, because it happened Thursday afternoon. The Cowboys actually did it. The Cowboys traded Micah Parsons. And so I guess I'm curious. I think people have a pretty good idea for who Micah Parsons is, Greg, but you've been doing this a long time. And this guy has burst onto the scene like few we've ever seen.
Sure.
His first 4 years. So what did the Cowboys just give up, and what did the Packers gain?
Well, I think about these things tactically, Ross. They gave up an impact playmaker who is a movable chess piece within the context of the defense, who therefore has to be accounted for by an offense on almost every play, certainly in pure pass situations where he can be a dominant player. So they don't have anyone to replace that. He's obviously one of the 2 or 3 best in the league at what he does. So the Cowboys are in a position now where it's kind of a work in progress. We don't know. It's week 1. We don't know how they're going to go about replacing that pass rush, whether they're going to ask another player to fill that kind of role tactically, or whether it's going to be much more of a base 4-man front when it comes to pure pass situations. These are things week 1 we don't know. Turning to the matchup, one thing that given a lot of thought to. The Eagles, as you well know, because you do their preseason games, they return everybody on offense. They really don't have any. I mean, Steen will play right guard, but he started games last year. They have every player is the same on offense. The Cowboys have a lot of moving pieces on defense. Two things I think we could well see tonight. We could well see a lot of no-huddle tempo, which, by the way, the Eagles did a lot of a year ago. And number two, it would not surprise me at all if the Eagles came out aggressively throwing the football out of the no-huddle tempo, because now you're dealing with communication, recognition at your linebacker and back-end level. And I think that they'll want to see how the Cowboys react to that.
Wow. You know what, Greg? So many good things to that, right? So you're right. The only guy being swapped out on offense is Steen for Mekhi Becton. They probably end up being almost a wash. We'll see. Maybe Steen's better. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But he's played enough for them that it's not like this is an unknown guy.
Right.
And you make a good point. You know, the Cowboys have a new D coordinator in Matt Eberflus.
Yep.
They have new guys with the green dot. You know, it's Kenneth Murray and Luafau are their linebackers. You know, the back end is similar with Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker. And I want to say Malik might have played for Eberflus back in the day in Indy. I'm not sure. But still, that would seem to make a lot of sense. And that also, Greg, is why you are different than other people, right? Like, and I'm not just saying this to toot your horn, but other people wouldn't go that in depth, think of it to that level where they really think, you know, I think they're going to do this. I just don't think that people think of it that way. You know, they'll talk about this player versus that player, whatever, but I don't know that people would go that deep. I think that is a terrific, terrific point.
Well, we know the Eagles run the ball, Ross. I mean, that's a given. They had the most first down carries in the league a year ago. One of the things the Eagles do exceptionally well, which caused significant problems for defenses, is they had far and away the most runs on third down and 4 to 8 yards in the NFL a year ago. And that makes it really difficult on defenses because that is a passing down for pretty much every team in the league, and therefore every defense plays pass defense on 3rd and 4 to 8 yards. The Eagles run the ball. And the reason they do that is because they go for it on 4th down. That became a staple of what they do. So they have become a very, very difficult offense to prepare for. And within the context of their offense, Jalen Hurts is a highly efficient player. He does not turn the football over. And that can't be overlooked. When you don't turn the ball over, and with the defense the Eagles have, you're giving the opponent long fields when you do have to punt. And it all fits together beautifully.
Listen, there's no offense where it's a good idea or no situation where it's a good idea to turn the football over. But when you've got a loaded team, right, you want to minimize the variance, right? So
great point.
If they're favored in almost every game. They have a better roster in almost every game. You're trying to minimize variance. Whereas the underdog, right, the team without as good, they want as much variance as possible. And I'll tell you this much, Greg, the defenses need to change their mindset, starting with the Cowboys night when they play the Eagles in those 3rd and 4 to 8. If you're a D lineman, you are thinking, I need to get pressure on Hurts. He'll hold the ball at times. I got to fly up the field. This old lineman, Lane Johnson, Mailata is good. They're not thinking run. They're not. And they need to be told. But think about this, Greg. Say you're Eberflus, and you say to them, guys, they could very possibly run it on 3rd and 4 to 8. You got to be aware of that. Think about what that does to the pass rush, Greg.
Correct.
I mean, so then when they do throw it in those situations, those guys are not just full throttle, ears pinned back. So it really helps both ways.
And this is where A.J. Brown becomes arguably, and again, you can debate who's more important, that kind of thing. That's not my point. But it's where A.J. Brown becomes exceedingly important because he can win as a plus split outside receiver. He can win one-on-one, and he gets a lot of one-on-ones outside the numbers. So he's an absolutely critical player in this offense.
All right, let's talk about the other side of the ball, Greg,
Yeah,
because that is where the Eagles have several question marks, and that's
sure.
where the Cowboys have some elite receivers, very talented. Dak Prescott's back. I guess especially with when you look at the run game for the Cowboys and who their runners are, and this is Fangio anyway, but I guess I'm expecting a bunch of two deep looks and not letting Pickens or CeeDee Lamb beat them deep over the top.
Well, there's so much here, and we can't get into everything. The Cowboys will need to have some kind of sustaining run game. They're clearly hoping that Williams, who they brought in from Denver, can return to what he was before the major injury. He's a sustaining power back. We'll see how they use Jadon Blue, he's not Jahmyr Gibbs, but in terms of how he tactically can be deployed in their offense, he's similar that way. I went through, believe it or not, Ross, you know the kind of stuff I do. I went through all of Dak Prescott's throws from last year. And I got to tell you, it was not an easy watch. I came away almost believing that there was something wrong with his lower body. Now, he's 32 years old, and he's had a lot of lower body injuries. He was very tight-hipped. He was very heavy-footed. His balance was off. It did not look good last year, even before he left for the season, I guess week 9 or 10 with the hamstring injury. So I'm very curious to see how he performs this year. Speaking of the matchup, there were rumblings, and you might know this more than I, having done their games and having spoken to people in the building more than I do, that Quinyon Mitchell might be moved a bit this year to match up at times, depending on who the opponent receiver is. We know that CeeDee Lamb, with George Pickens there now, CeeDee Lamb is a movement motion player. He's not a boundary X. He's not the single receiver. That's George Pickens. So the question is, will Quinyon Mitchell at times match up to Pickens? Because Adoree Jackson is just too small for that matchup, because Pickens is 6'3", long, lanky, can run. I'm very curious to see if that happens tonight.
That's a really good point. Last thing on this game, and we're spending more time on this game than we normally do, but I'm calling the game, and it's tonight. It's the opener. The Cowboys just gave a 2-year extension, Greg, to their fullback, Hunter Lupke.
Yes.
And I guess I'm just curious, $7.5 million. He's now the third highest paid fullback in the NFL. Do you have a thought on that? That interested me.
Yeah, well, couple of thoughts. Number one, you don't do that if you're not going to play in meaningful snaps. I'm not suggesting he's Kyle Juszczyk and they're going to play 21 personnel on 40% of the snaps, but you don't do that if he's going to play 5 snaps. So they're going to be a 21 personnel offense to some meaningful extent. The other thing that stands out watching tape is he's actually a pretty good receiver. So in a sense, like Juszczyk, that he can be deployed lining up in multiple locations within the formation because he is a good receiver. So I'm anxious to see. Again, week 1, there's so many unknowns, Ross, as you know. So much of this is speculative.
What are you thinking in the Friday night game? It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Chiefs and Chargers in Brazil.
Yeah, that's an intriguing game. I'm going to be curious to see the Chiefs pass game. I think that they know, and it's funny, even in the press conference after the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes talked about things he felt that he needed to get better at. And for a lot of people listening, they say, "Oh, he wins Super Bowls, he's a Hall of Famer," which he will be. Of course, that's not the point. There's always room for improvement, and I think that I watched both matchups last year, Chiefs O, Chargers D. And in the first matchup, Derwin James did not play. And the Chargers played a ton of zone coverage, 2-shell zone. In the second matchup with Derwin James, they played far more man coverage because James can match up to Kelsey. The other issue here is I think that the Chargers will absolutely challenge the left side of the Chiefs' offensive line with Sua Matea at left guard and the rookie Simmons at left tackle with multiple stunt concepts. And I think Mack versus Simmons will be a matchup to watch in this game. So, those are a couple of things that I thought of as I watched the tape from last year and thought about the matchup Friday night.
I love that, Greg. Listen, you have to test those guys physically and mentally, right? I mean, it's the first start essentially for both of them. Sua Matea at guard, Simmons at tackle. I'd be running blitzes, stunts, twists. Let's figure out. These guys haven't worked together that much. They're not that experienced. Let's now. The flip side is, I would expect the Chiefs and Creed Humphrey to be sliding left to protect those guys quite a bit and try to get 3 for 2 or 3 for 3 over there and ask Trey Smith and Jawan Taylor on the other side to man up.
One response to that, particularly in pure pass situations, Ross, is you line up in what we call loaded fronts with 3 defensive linemen to that side, because then Humphrey will absolutely go there, and then the wide 9 on the other side becomes Khalil Mack, and he gets the one-on-one against Jawan Taylor, and they would feel pretty good about that if you're the Chargers.
No question. Okay, what about, Greg, some of the other matchups that jump out Sunday? How about the Bucs and the Falcons? I think it's pretty clear these are the 2 best teams probably in the NFC South. So this is a big early season game to see who gets the head-to-head win. The Bucs have a new OC in Josh Grizzard, a Yale guy I've known for a long time. And the Falcons, it's Penix time.
Yeah, and the one thing that stood out when I watched Penix 3 starts last year, which was different, obviously, than when Kirk Cousins played, because Penix is a different kind of thrower, is he pushes the ball down the field. There's a lot more intermediate vertical type throws because Penix, he did that at Washington. That's the way he sees the game. He's a very aggressive thrower. I think they'll try to do more of that because it plays to his strength. Hard to get a read on what the defense will look exactly like for the Falcons at this time, just because different coordinator, some new pieces. Obviously, they addressed their pass rush. We'll see if the 2 rookies play meaningful snaps and can be a factor, James Pierce and Jalen Walker. The Bucs offense, I know they have a new coordinator. I can't imagine there'll be a lot of changes conceptually because it was very good, and Baker had a very good year, and they were phenomenal in the red zone a year ago. Very conceptual with what they did and very good. Now, the question is, when there's a new coordinator, to me, when you don't change the concepts, then becomes play calling during a game. And there's no way to know that. You'd have to be in the meetings all week to know how they're going about doing that in given situations. But that, to me, becomes the issue, because I can't imagine, given the success they had a year ago, Ross, that conceptually they're going to change a whole lot.
And I want to make one point here real quick, because I've talked to a bunch of coaches about this. The whole offensive staff in the meetings, they decide what they think their best 3rd and 3 to 5 play is, 3rd and 6 to 8, all those things. And then that's usually the first one they call. Now, they see what happens with the defense or whatever, but I do think it's more of a group effort, maybe, Greg, than people realize sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, and you don't know. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of unknowns week 1.
Okay, let's talk speaking of unknowns, Raiders and Patriots. The Las Vegas Raiders, New England Patriots. I'm not quite sure what the Patriots are doing. Duggar's been benched, and they cut Jabril Peppers. I mean, the Patriots, they cut Strange. Vrabel's cutting bait with a lot of guys that are, from the Belichick era and bringing in his own guys. Meanwhile, the Raiders have a lot of change. Pete Carroll, Geno Smith at quarterback. So I'm curious what you're kind of looking for and expecting here.
Well, I think the obvious is Genty, so we'll leave that alone. I mean, I think everybody's probably talking about that. Pete Carroll, run game, that's why they drafted Genty. I spent a lot of time this offseason looking at Drake May's season as a rookie. Obviously, new coordinator in Josh McDaniels, who does things differently than the previous coordinator. But I thought May last year, when I watched him, I thought he showed some things that were very positive. I thought he showed a pretty innate feel for making timing throws between the numbers versus both zone and man coverage. I thought he had a pretty natural sense of anticipation. I thought that he has and I don't think you can teach this, that sense of staying in the pocket and being pocket tough when there's pressure that he knows is there. And that is something you can't really teach. I think he has the arm strength to play off his back foot. He has a quick, sudden arm. He can snap throws off. There were snapshots where he moved and manipulated defenders with his head and eyes. I thought there was a lot to like in watching his tape. And he's one of those players I'm very anxious to see his development this season.
Yeah, I'm curious too with Josh McDaniels what that looks like as well. Plus, Travion Henderson. I mean, they've had so much success over the years. Think about like Kevin Falk. Like some of these
Yeah.
backs that are good on third down out of the backfield. That's one that jumps out to me for sure as well, Greg. And you're right. I think the Raiders passing game and how the Patriots, Vrabel, he's going to have something cooked up for Brock Bowers, Greg.
No question. And Vrabel has a clearly defined view of what he wants players to be and how he wants to play, and we'll see how it plays out. One thing about Vrabel's teams normally is there's a physical toughness to them. So we'll see. The Patriots, they really made a lot of changes on defense in the offseason. They brought in I think Robert Spillane, probably the least known of the players they brought in. He's a really good football player.
He's a captain, and he's going against his former team, the Raiders. All right, we'll finish up episode 1, Steelers-Jets. Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields swapping teams, and now the Jets lose Vera Tucker again for the season, Greg.
Yeah. Here's the way I think about Aaron Rodgers. Again, so much are unknowns. But when you bring Aaron Rodgers in, Aaron Rodgers has a clearly defined way in which he plays, that he's played at a very high level. Aaron Rodgers has always been one of the quarterbacks that controls the game at the line of scrimmage. You want to let him have the freedom to see things because he's been one of the smartest quarterbacks ever to play the game. So when you bring in an Aaron Rodgers, it's like when the Broncos brought in Peyton Manning with Adam Gase. Not that you let Aaron Rodgers do everything. Obviously, Arthur Smith has an approach, and things he's put in. But I'm very curious to see how that works together because you have to let Rodgers, I don't want to be cliched and sound stupid, but you have to let Rodgers be Rodgers and do what he does best. He is so good controlling the game at the line of scrimmage. He needs to have that freedom. He needs to feel that he has that freedom. And I always wonder when you do that, what that balance is. We're not going to know that week 1, but I think that that's going to be something that is a work in progress in the early part of the season.
What's interesting about that is when you're a coach, that's tough to give up that. You know what I mean? Like, he better be right. Otherwise, as a coach, you're sitting there thinking, what am I even doing here if this guy's changing everything? What about, real quick, Greg, Fields on the other side? I think the Jets are still going to try to run the crap out of the ball. I think they're going to run Fields a lot.
Yeah, they're going to run Fields. I think it's going to be, I don't want to say a college offense because the more and more quarterbacks coming into the league can run, but I think you've got to defend that. That changes the way you play defense. We've talked about that for years with Jalen Hurts and how important a factor that is in the Eagles defense and how defenses then have to play that. And I think that's a key element for how the Steelers go about playing that.
Packers, Lions, Ravens, Bills, Niners, Seahawks, Texans, Rams, Bears, Vikings, a bunch of games to get into still with Greg and more, by the way, on tomorrow's podcast. Going to be absolutely awesome. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks, Ross. Looking forward to it.
All right, let's dive into the news. But first, I was telling you guys earlier in the week about my first game on the Game Time app. Eagles, Cowboys. How about Sunday's game? Cardinals, Saints, noon, Caesars Superdome. You can get in for $45. And they have super deals, lower level, 121 row 35 for $115. And remember, with the Game Time app, fees are included, okay? These other websites or apps or whatever, they'll surprise you at the end with crazy high fees. You don't want that. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code ROSS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code ROSS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, I got a new idea for Labatt here, okay? If you guys go to rewards.labattusa.com and you get any of the incredible merch they have, I have the fridge, the mini fridge, and I have the cooler backpack. If you get anything, I will send you a signed autograph in the mail. How awesome is that? Just go to rewards.labattusa.com. This is obviously after you buy some Labatt, you upload your receipt. That's how you get exclusive merch. It's the only way to get this merch. Rewards.labattusa.com. But if you do this, if you buy beer and get gear and show me proof with an email to ross@rosstucker.com, I just decide I'm sending you an autograph in the mail. ross@rosstucker.com. Rewards.labattusa.com. It's like a win-win-win.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, there's a lot of signings around the league. Cowboys, they bring in fullback Hunter Lepke. The Bills, they sign Gabe Davis. Ravens, they bring in JT Gray. The Texans, they sign Davis Mills with 1 year, $7 million fully guaranteed extension. And Niners wide receiver Juwan Jennings, he received an additional $3.5 million in incentives.
So this is how I know either you don't follow it closely enough, Jack, or you weren't paying attention. You know Hunter Lepke's already on the Cowboys, right? He's got a 2-year extension.
Yes, but you're giving me a script here, and you don't give any notes, so I'm throwing you under the bus for this one.
You got to pay attention.
I'm working on the show.
Greg and I were just talking about this, how the Cowboys gave Lepke an extension. Anyway, I love it. Make fullbacks relevant again. I hope he has a great year. I hope they give him the ball a lot. I guess Gabe Davis is still injured for the Bills, going to start on the practice squad. So I don't know when we'll actually see Gabe Davis, but he was visiting a lot of teams this offseason. The Ravens signing JT Gray is the most Ravens thing ever, right? The guy's an all-pro special teamer. Of course the Ravens just scoop him up probably for very little before the year even starts. The Texans love them from some Davis Mills. They guarantee that guy more money every year. And then Juwan Jennings, he just wanted more money. They didn't really give him more money. But if he has another big year, he'll make a couple $1 million more and still be a free agent. The only other note I wanted to mention real quick, Jack, Greg and I touched on it. I feel so bad for Jets fans sometimes. I feel so bad for Elijah Vera Tucker. I feel like every Jets season is Groundhog Day, and at some point Vera Tucker gets hurt early in the year and is lost for the season. They're counting on that offensive line. That is a big, big loss. Greg Cosell again tomorrow. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com, backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, and Pizza Boy Brewing.